everybody and welcome to the BMW M1. It was BMW's first supercar. It was designed for racing, but for much of its production run, it couldn't race. It was M Division's first production car, but it wasn't really produced by M or even BMW. It wasn't really a German car at all. And it was almost responsible for Lamborghini's bankruptcy in the early 80s. In order to make you understand about that, we're going to talk a little bit about the car's history, and then we're going to take it out for a drive. So in the early 70s, Bob Lutz, very famous because he ended up heading the big three in the US, and Jochen Neerpach, apologies on the pronunciation of that, got together. So Lutz was the head of sales and marketing at BMW at the time. Neerpach was an ex-racer. They decided to create a special division aside from BMW, linked but separate, to be called the Motorsports Division. They ran the 3-litre CSL, also known as the Batmobile, with some success, but they found that using a road car that they had to sort of change for racing was a difficult way of doing things. They wanted a purpose-made race car. Now, BMW at that point wasn't really in a position to do load number production or even to produce something like this, so they approached Lamborghini. Lamborghini did the initial design work and production for the tooling, and inspiration for the looks of the car were taken from a concept car called the Turbo, which I think was shown in 1972. Giugiaro, however, very heavily revised that concept for the M1 that we can see today. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit murky, because at this point in time, Lamborghini was actually financially in dire straits. So in order to be able to do the production of the M1, not only did they get some money in from BMW, but they also received a government grant. At around the same time though, they were approached by an American defense contractor to design and build a car which could be used for military applications. That was going to be called the Lamborghini Cheetah. The thing is, Lamborghini being Lamborghini, they decided to take some shortcuts. They didn't have enough money for both projects, and they diverted some of the money, the grants received from the Italian government for this project, onto the Cheetah project. At that stage, BMW realized as well that Lamborghini had been playing with them. Lamborghini was close to bankruptcy. So at this stage, they faced the very real prospect of the receivers coming in and taking all the parts that BMW had already paid for. What did they do? They broke in late one night with 2 lorries, took the prototypes, took the tooling, and then they had to rearrange the whole production process. So what ended up happening is that the actual production of the car itself, putting everything together, that moved to Ital Engineering, which was a company set up by some of the Lamborghini engineers. The body itself was made by TIR, Trasformazioni Italiane Resine, pronounced the Italian way. So that stayed the same. They continued to produce the body. The frame was produced by another Italian company called Marchese. And the interior was designed and assembled by Giugiaro's own Italdesign. And this is where we have one of the few German bits of the whole process. Once all that was done and the car was practically assembled, it was then sent to Bauer in Germany, in Stuttgart, to have the engine and gearbox put in. So you can see why I was saying that this was not a German car. It's really an Italian car. It did, however, have a German engine. Let's take it out now and I can tell you more about that incredible engine and, more importantly, how the M1 drives. So firstly, a massive thanks to Richard, who has entrusted me with this very, very, very special M1 today. I cannot tell you how excited I have been about this prospect. First thoughts, well, the driving position is a bit odd. So you have, the pedals are quite offset to the right. Not only that, but you also have the brake pedal so close to the throttle pedal that I have to tilt my throttle foot, my right foot, in order not to press it. To be fair, Richard did tell me, bring the smaller shoes you have, and I forgot. So with some smaller shoes, it might be better. Apart from that, there really isn't much room in here. I do just about fit. You can see my head is skimming the ceiling, but my legs are at quite odd angles there. The wheel is the right sort of reach, but it is tilted slightly towards me on this side. So it's quite an odd arrangement, but in every other way, it's quite different to the Italian supercars of this time. So the interior may have been made, in theory, by an Italian firm, but it really doesn't feel like it. It uses mainly BMW switchgear, and it feels quite well put together, quite well organized, much more ergonomic than any of the Italian stuff made around this point, really. I love the sort of houndstooth type material. Is it houndstooth? I don't know, but the cloth material in the center of the seats looks great. Now, I personally find the seats quite uncomfortable. Obviously, I'm a bit too tall for this car, so that doesn't help, but it's just the way they sort of seem to grab you quite a lot low down in your back, and then open up. I don't know, they don't particularly work well for me. I think if it was a long-term user, I would struggle slightly with that and the general driving position. We have to talk a little bit now, sorry, about this engine as well. I forgot, that's what I should have led with. It was made purposefully for this car. It's an inline straight six, uber well known. Individual throttle bodies, in this application 277 horsepower. It also appeared subsequently in a lot of other BMWs, famously the first ever M5. It is a real thoroughbred, proper racing engine. What is absolutely staggering about the M1 is just how usable it is. Because of the way it looks, because it is really Italian designed with that tubular steel chassis, all the rest of it is a racing car. I was expecting it to be a little bit of a handful to drive, and yet, apart from the driving position, I would say it's pretty much as easy to live with, almost, as a 911. Yes, it was very wide for the time, but by today's standards, it's not actually that bad at all. It's pretty quiet. The gearbox suits the car perfectly. The throw's good. It's not super short, it's not super long, and it has just about enough notchiness to make it feel positive, that you know when the gear has engaged, but not to get in the way of the shifting. It's quite a light mechanism as well, and the only criticism I would put to that is that, God, I love this car. Yes. The only criticism I would say is that there is a little bit of slop, and I guess it's going all the way back to the engine, but some of the Ferrari gear changes I've used, including in my own 308, that is better, that has more precision, but they do tend to be maybe a little bit heavier, so maybe that's the trade-off, I don't know. This feels a little bit rubbly sometimes when it's engaging, but it's good. It is good. It's light, and it kind of is in sync with the rest of the car's controls. The steering is a little bit heavy at parking speeds, but once you get moving, it's absolutely spot on. Let's do a pull. It doesn't have a lot of torque low down, you kind of have to rev it, and this one, unfortunately, because of the weights in the rotor arm, the limiter comes in a bit earlier than it should. It comes in at 6, which is when it really is it starts to fly around 5, but it feels like it's just going to keep going past 6, and I can't sample that in this particular car. Interestingly, on the revs there, it has the red at about sort of 6.8, but you'll notice that at 7.6, that red line disappears. Richard, the owner, told me that is because for racing, that isn't really a red line. That is, because it revs way past that, that is a spot at which you should not maintain revs because there's some sort of harmonic imbalance. So if you stay there for too long, it might damage the engine. These were really, really reliable because they were originally designed to put up to 850 horsepower for Group 5 racing. So in this application, they are generally pretty solid. Oh my God, it's just so nice. I didn't think it would be this exploitable. I really didn't. It's not hard to drive. The steering, as I said, okay, it's heavy at parking speeds, but then as soon as you go, it gets this absolutely lovely tactile quality. It really lightens up, but at the same time, the feedback is just gushing through. And it feels really well balanced mid-corner. When you're going in, it just feels like it's set up just right. Now the brake pedal on this one feels a little bit soft, so there's quite a lot of initial travel. I don't know if that's the way they were, or if perhaps the master cylinder on this is past its best. I mean, it does brake fine eventually, but it's not that sort of hard, rock solid brake pedal that I was expecting. So even by today's standards, this really is quite a quick car, and I don't just mean in terms of acceleration, but even sort of mid-corner. It's only got 205s at the front and 225s at the back, but it feels like it really has plenty of grip. I've got nowhere near the limits today. Now, yet another thing which is absolutely mind-boggling about this extraordinary car is just how well it rides. Now you tip it into corners and it resists roll pretty well, but go down these roads and it has a really, really luxurious feeling sort of suspension movement. It's just, obviously it's a bit limited in suspension travel. The bigger sort of bumps, especially brakes in the road, doesn't deal with quite as well, but everything else, it just feels absolutely spot on. And this car is on the original Bilstein dampers that were sorted out, that were rebuilt by Bilstein, so it is riding exactly as it should. This is just such a jewel of a car. If you look around it, the interior is immaculate. It has been retrimmed because at some point it was trimmed in red by one owner, and the color was changed from the original white to silver. But this is just such a lovely looking car. Everywhere you look in the interior, it's just like new. Throttle response on the Inline Six is just instant. And you know, it just has, because it's behind you rather than in front of you like it was in the M5 or M635 that I drove recently, it just adds to the sense of, I don't know, to the purposefulness, the sort of sense that this is a special thing that you're driving. It does sound different. It's the same engine, but it sounds different. So I started off this video by saying that this was the German car that was really actually Italian. And if you break it down and look at how it was designed, built, put together, apart from the German engine, there really isn't that much German influence in it. Yet, when I come to drive it, strangely, bizarrely, I do get a feeling that it does feel like a German car. If you compare it to the Italian supercars of that era, to 512s, to 308s, to Lamborghinis, to Jalpas, it feels like a much more together design. The whole car feels so solid. I know that that structure, the chassis, really was immensely strong, and perhaps that's where it differs from the Countach, in that the Countach was never really designed to go racing. This was. As a result, it just feels like it works, to me at least. It works extremely well. There is one area though in which this doesn't quite live up to the Italian cars, and that is simply in engine sound. The engine is great, but it obviously was designed to go racing, and the best layout for them was this Inline Six. And it sounds great, but it doesn't offer up quite the same kind of drama as the Italian V12s. I have a little caveat here in that it still sounds absolutely awesome, and in this car it's not revving quite as high up as it should, so obviously I'm slightly taken aback on you know, compared to the full experience. But all the same, I think the V12s do have a bit of the edge in terms of pure excitement, but the rest of the car, it's so usable, it's so drivable. I love this, let me tell you. I mean, they are now worth an absolutely obscene amount of money, but if it wasn't for that they're so out of reach, I would absolutely adore to have one of these. I really, really do like it that much. If you would like me to do a review on your car, please do get in touch. I am looking for some of the Maseratis and Lamborghinis of this era, things like the Jalpa or the Maserati Bora, but anything from the 70s and so on, other cars as well. Thank you all so much for having watched today. As I told you earlier, the development of the Lamborghini LM002 is intrinsically linked with the BMW M1. If you want to see the whole story about that, then please have a look at this video here. See you soon.